A few years ago, I was asked to consult with a task force that was looking at the ordination process for a denomination. And the way they believed it is that only a church could ordain a pastor, but they had a group of pastors from area churches that would test and evaluate every student to see whether they passed the test to recommend licensure or ordination to the church. And when they were talking about that and describing the system to me, I simply said, why don't we just let the churches decide who they license and ordain, since ultimately they're the only ones who have the authority to do it. And one of the pastors says, oh, no, we can't do that. These people in church, they can't be trusted to know the scriptures and the doctrines to test and evaluate these emerging pastors. We need to do that. So when I heard that, I asked the pastor, well, how long have you been pastoring your church? He got a little puffed up. He said, I've been here 25 years. I said, you mean to tell me you've been going and preaching the Bible to the same people week in and week out for 25 years, and still they're not qualified to know what good doctrine is and bad doctrine? What's wrong with your teaching, man? He got quiet all of a sudden. I think we need to reevaluate the whole system, because we elevate teaching at the expense of learning, and that needs to change. I don't want to do away with teachers. I don't want to do away with teaching. I used to think that the teaching gift is the bottleneck that stops all movements and multiplication. And the reason why is because you're a good teacher. Everybody wants to come here. You teach. They're all coming in. No one's going out. And it stops all movement. So when I wanted to start a movement, I intentionally dumbed down my teaching so that it would multiply. And it succeeded. I multiplied stupidity. Wasn't really the best solution. So I went back to the drawing board and I asked God, okay, what role does the teacher play in a multiplication movement? And he took me back to the passage where it talks about the teacher, Ephesians 4:11. It says, and he gave some as apostles and prophets and evangelists and pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints for the work of service to the building up of the body. And he said, look at this. And I looked at it with fresh eyes and I realized the evangelist isn't called to reach lost people for Jesus. The evangelist is called to equip the saints to reach lost people for Jesus. And the teacher isn't called to teach the saints, but rather to equip the saints to teach. So then I asked the next question. Does the Bible tell us that all saints are supposed to teach? I ask that question all the time. And the answer I always get is a spontaneous, not shaking of the head saying no. Which is fascinating to me, because the Bible actually does teach us that all of us are to teach. Why is it we are so conditioned, so indoctrinated to believe only a few teach? For job security, I think. So I'll mention a few of the verses. First we'll start with the Great Commission. How many think we should all fulfill the Great Commission? They all raise their hands. Well, right in the middle of the Great Commission, we are to teach them to obey all that I commanded you. That means all of us should be teaching. Fast forward, you get to 1 Corinthians. When you assemble together as a church, each one, it says, has a teaching. Didn't see that now, did you? Fast forward a little bit more, you get to Colossians. Let the word of Christ richly dwell within you. And the result is you will be teaching one another. That's not enough. You get to Hebrews. And in Hebrews, it says, chapter 5, by now you all ought to be teachers. But all you can handle is milk. He says, because of dullness of hearing too so much you become callous to it, you can only handle milk. You can't be a teacher. What is milk, I ask all the time? Milk is a pre-digested meal. The mother eats the meal, the body absorbs the nutrients, and it comes out of the glands for the baby as milk. That, my friends, is what a sermon is. A sermon is milk. And if the only time you receive God's word is through a sermon, you're a baby who's addicted to milk. And that's the way we're all milkaholics. We're all lactose dependent. sermons are the only way God speaks to us, and that has to change. And the best way to learn is by passing on the teaching yourself. Every pastor knows this. When you prepare a message, you learn 10 times as much as the people you're speaking to. Then have them do some teaching. The way to really equip the body is to equip the people so they teach. Now, that may mean you're less important, but it might actually bear a lot of fruit. We need to, what we value, we measure. And we measure our teaching. I would like to change the scorecard for teaching. All right? Teachers love to give tests. Here's the test for the teacher. If you get your message right, you only get 25% on the test. That's a quarter. That's failing. So getting the message right is not enough. If you get the message right and the people who hear it understand it, you get 50%. Now, 50% on a test, that's still failing. If you get the message right and they understand it and they apply it to their lives, now you get 75% on the test. You're barely passing, you're getting a C. If you get the message right, they understand it, they apply it to their lives, and they pass it on to others, now you get 100%. This ought to be the way we evaluate our teaching. Are the people who hear this message passing it on to others? Are we equipping the saints to teach? This is the way teaching should be happening in the church. When we suggest to the ordinary people that they all ought to be passing on the teaching, it causes them to freeze up in fear because they've seen teaching elevated to such a status they don't believe they know enough. And I usually try to resolve that by teaching people 3 little words that will help them in any time they're meeting with someone. If you want to teach someone, these 3 little words will be your best helpers. The words are, I don't know. See, we've been taught to think we have to have all the answers, and you don't. You can, if someone asks you a good question, you can say, I don't know. Let's go look into it. Let's ask God for an answer. Suddenly now, all of us can be teachers. All of us can help facilitate learning, because learning is what's most important. So when it comes to teaching, here's some very simple but profound advice. Don't teach a second lesson until the first lesson is learned, and a lesson isn't learned until it's being passed on to someone else. Then we won't be educated beyond our obedience. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and like a video if you like it. Thank you. Listen to Jesus. Do what he says.